In Iowa, the disappearance of a 12-year-old paperboy spawns a groundbreaking search and rumors of a sinister conspiracy.
Ran chills down the spine. It's like, this can't be happening.
Now, on Vanished.
In 2005, I got the call telling me that my daughter, Natalie, had vanished.
Every parent's worst nightmare became my reality.
I asked the world to help me.
I found myself in an unimaginable fight. But my search for answers gave me a new mission in life.
Bring the missing home and criminals to justice.
Coming up, West Des Moines, Iowa, 1982. 12-year-old Johnny Gosch has a Sunday morning paper route. Until one morning, he vanishes.
A young boy delivering newspapers, which every God-fearing American kid wants to do, ends up disappearing.
As the search for Johnny unfolds, a terrifying theory emerges.
They were kidnapping and selling children.
Human trafficking is driven by money, more money, and more money.
Beth Holloway sets out to learn the truth about the heartbreaking and groundbreaking search for Johnny Gosch.
We put his picture on a milk carton. That was the very first one that ever took place.
When a child is missing, parents will cling to any information that gives them hope. But one family's 30-year mission to find their son has brought them face to face with evidence almost too shocking to believe and too frightening to ignore.
West Des Moines, Iowa, 1982. Fifth grader Johnny Gosch is his parents' pride and joy.
Johnny was a great kid, do anything for anybody.
He was a delightful little guy, so happy and just fun to have in the house. And he would be so kind to other people as he started to grow up.
At the age of 12, Johnny decides he wants to make some money. He begs his parents to take on a paper delivery route.
What was he saving for?
He was saving for a dirt bike.
I know you had to be so proud of his decision to take on a paper route to earn money.
He was a special kid.
Johnny's parents agreed to the paper route with one condition.
The only thing that I said was that one of us, the parents, his dad or myself, had to be with him when he did the route, because he was getting out before daylight, going out in the dark.
But on Sunday, September 5th, 1982, Johnny decides to do the paper route by himself. At 5:45 a.m., while his parents sleep, Johnny slips out of the house. An hour later, the phone rings at the Gosch residence.
It was a neighbor saying they didn't get their paper. And they said, "What's wrong? Is Johnny running late today?" And it was the first time it ever happened.
Johnny's father immediately begins searching the neighborhood.
I went out and started looking, going from block to block, and didn't see anything. And kept looking and looking and looking, and I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what, but something wasn't right. And that's when the panic set in.
Johnny's father came back and said, "He's gone. His wagon is sitting up at the corner, full of papers. The bundles have not even been cut. Something is definitely wrong."
The Gosches track down the other paper boys that work with Johnny, and they tell a terrifying story.
The paper carrier saw this person in this Ford Fairmont stop, back up, and talk to Johnny.
The guy said, "Hey, kid, where's 86th Street?" And Johnny turned to the older boy and said, "There's something wrong with this guy." He said, "I'm scared, I'm going home."
According to the paper carriers, as soon as Johnny started walking away, another stranger began following him on foot.
We don't feel that Johnny even realized he was being followed because the man stayed a ways behind.
Fearing something terrible has happened, the Gosches contact the police.
The officer at the time knew that this wasn't a runaway. This is something that was serious, so he called in area officers to come in and start doing a canvass of the neighborhood.
The police quickly discovered that a neighbor witnessed what happened to Johnny next. At the end of the block, Johnny was ambushed by the Ford Fairmont and the man seen following him on foot.
The car pulled up, somebody jumped out, and just like that, they both grabbed him, threw him in the car, and they took off, screeching tires and running the stop sign.
I know your heart must have sank, Noreen.
I began calling friends that we had all over the city, asking them to organize search parties to do something.
We searched all around the Des Moines area. Our basement became a copy center. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of flyers we did send out, but that was part of the first reaction.
The search lasts several weeks, but Johnny isn't found.
You'd pray that they would find something, but you would pray that they didn't. And each time they would come back and didn't find a body, that was reason to be hopeful.
While the police continue searching, the Gosches enlist the help of a private investigator. He puts forth a disturbing theory: that Johnny might have been kidnapped by an organized group of pedophiles.
If you look at these kidnappings, you have to first figure out what type of kidnapping is it. Is it a parental or custodial kidnapping? Is it a pedophilia type kidnapping?
Taking kids for prostitution rings, pornography rings, whatever. Friend, chills down the spine, you know, it's like, this can't be happening.
But 6 months later in Oklahoma, a bizarre incident gives the theory credence and provides investigators with the first break in Johnny's case.
6 months after Johnny's disappearance, you learn that he is alive. What happened?
This woman was at a convenience center, and a young boy came running up to her and screamed, "I am Johnny Gosch, please help me, I've been kidnapped." Before the woman could do anything, 2 men came around the side of the building, grabbed him, put him back in a car, and then took off.
Police are unable to track down the car or its passengers. And despite the sighting in Oklahoma, 2 years pass without any new leads. Then, on August 12, 1984, 13-year-old Eugene Martin is abducted from the streets of West Des Moines. Like Johnny, Eugene is in the middle of his Sunday morning paper route.
The similarities are obvious. Just about the same age, both paper carriers, just about the same time of year.
2 young boys now suddenly vanishing.
It just created panic. People wouldn't let their kids out of the house alone because they didn't know who would be next.
A year and a half after Eugene Martin's disappearance, a third young boy, 13-year-old Mark Allen, also vanishes from the streets of Des Moines.
One of the things that came out of this is that nobody knew how bad the problem was. We had no concept about how many children were being abducted.
The kidnappings prompt the Gosches to take a revolutionary approach to finding their son and to helping others whose children have vanished.
We put this picture on a milk carton. That was the very first one that ever took place. I remember going to the dairy in Iowa and said, "Hey, can we do this?" And they thought it was a good idea.
The idea takes off. Soon, missing children are being profiled on milk cartons across the country. Many of these children are ultimately found. Not Johnny Gosch.
It's a bad dream. It really is. People would come up and say, "Well, you know, we know how you feel." And I would think, no, we don't.
But just when the search for Johnny seems to have hit a dead end, a convicted felon comes forward with a shocking story.
Do you know for sure who abducted Johnny Gosch?
Yes.
In 1982, 12-year-old Johnny Gosch vanishes while delivering his morning paper route. 7 years later, the Gosches are still searching for their son.
There's no time for a pity party when this stuff happens. If parents don't look for their kids, nobody else is going to do it.
Finally, in May of 1989, there's a break in the case. A Nebraska convict by the name of Paul Benassi tells the police that he knows firsthand what happened to Johnny.
Paul Benassi said, I helped with the Johnny Gosch kidnapping. I was the one in the car. I was in the back seat. I was the one that jumped out and grabbed Johnny's legs, while the man who followed Johnny grabbed his shoulders.
They had a couple of pictures of Johnny, and they said that this is the one that they wanted to get.
Benassi says he's part of a vast network of sexual predators operating across the Midwest. A network that ensnared Benassi himself when he was a teenager.
Paul Benassi was a victim who was also used. These children, after they have been molested, they themselves become part and recruit other kids to be put into this. And as long as a boy behaves, he can survive.
Noreen sets up a face-to-face meeting with Paul Benassi in prison.
I feel so bad about it, because what they made me do.
Benassi broke down and just cried when he saw me. And he said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did. But they forced me to.
Noreen is certain she finally knows what happened to her son. But her husband isn't so sure.
He was saying a lot of things that were kind of hard to believe. I would say about 40% of it was the truth and 60% was made up. Noreen believed this kid 100%, and but I didn't.
In 1992, Benassi is released from prison and tells his story on the TV show America's Most Wanted. As part of the show, Benassi leads a film crew to an abandoned ranch in Colorado, where he claims Johnny Gosch and countless other boys were once held captive.
This is where they kept some of the kids hidden away underneath the house here. I almost couldn't do it, to even go near the house, because I got up there and just, the memories flooded back of the last time I was here and leaving here, because this was the last place I ever seen Johnny Gosch at.
Shortly after Benassi's segment airs, Noreen is contacted by a young man named Jimmy Gibson. He also claims to have been at the ranch with Johnny.
Were there any proof of life questions that you could ask Jimmy that he could answer correctly to make sure that you knew it was your Johnny?
I asked and verified about the birthmark that Johnny had on his chest. And Jimmy described the shape of it perfectly, along with other things that Johnny told him that he had in his room. That information had never been in a news story. Never. And Jimmy knew it.
Jimmy Gibson also tells Noreen about a horrible identifying mark that all the boys held captive at the ranch now bear.
The brand is what they call the rocking X, like a half of a circle, and then there's an X in the center. Jimmy had that brand on his leg. Paul Benassi carries that brand. Jimmy told us that Johnny also carries that brand.
It's a story almost too sadistic to be true, but investigators are already familiar with the notorious Rocking X.
In the underground, we started observing and hearing about the Rocking X in about 1968-69. We had followed it out to somewhere in Colorado where there was a Rocking X operation going on. That was the last I knew of it. And then when Johnny came along and I saw the Rocking X again, I immediately knew what the Rocking X was.
Jimmy Gibson claims that many of the young boys managed to escape the ranch where Rocking X held them captive. Among them was Johnny Gosch, but Jimmy has no idea where Johnny is now. To Noreen, Jimmy Gibson's story gels with everything she knows about her son's disappearance. Johnny's father doesn't think so.
It was like there was too many lies being laid out on the table there in front of us.
The differences of opinion, coupled with the strain of losing Johnny, eventually drives a wedge between them. 11 years after their son vanished, Noreen and John Gosch divorce.
Oh, it just tears you apart, basically. So, especially when You got opinions. Each of us had opinions of what may have happened.